one of our major focuses today is to help you understand what you have to do and why you have to do it, and what those, and what those steps are likely to be. So that's really what we're going to kind of walk through you with today and answer some of your questions and help you get going in that direction. What we're going to do is, hopefully everybody's done Zoom before, so you know there's a chat feature at the bottom of your screen. As you have questions, don't do it with audio, do it by chat. And that will, and Allison and David will be checking in on those, and we'll be able to respond to those as best we can throughout the process. Some of you have passed out, given us questions ahead of time. They will be incorporated into our discussion as well. So that's probably the major preliminaries on this. Our goal is to finish this by 5 o'clock because the county is having a special briefing at 5 o'clock where Jason Molino and Frank Krupa will be talking more about what's happening with the reopening from the county's perspective, and many of us will be sitting in on that. So let me turn this over to Jennifer. We're going to share the screen here, and Jennifer's going to walk you through some of the details about what is needed to get you open and started. Remember, all businesses are required to do reopening plans. And so what we're talking about here today is reopening plans for curbside retail only. There will be other plans. There will be other guidance coming out in the next week or two on reopening regular retail. But today, all that the state has put out at this point is curbside retail. And so it's important to remember that, because already the press has gotten it confused, and many people who have called all of us over the course of the last couple of days have gotten it confused. So with that, Jennifer.
Thanks, Gary, and I appreciate everything you said in the intro. Just want to preface this with, we've all been sending information out. We know that you all can read and you can access the state's website and read through these guidelines yourself, but I thought it was really important to just give us a basis for sort of walking through everything that's going to be necessary for folks. And just to clarify, it's curbside or in-store pickup, especially in the event that you don't have a curbside that you can easily access. And then, the other piece of this is that someone could go online, read through the lengthy guideline document for each industry sector, sign the attestation, send it back, and think that they're on their way. We really are all in agreement here, the Chamber, the DIA, the city, that people need to not just read the guidelines, they need to be prepared to actually comply with everything that they're saying they're going to do. To that end, what we've done is try to summarize everything for you and give you, a really strong sense of everything that's going to be required. And I'm just going to try to walk through these as quickly as we can to make sure that we do have time for additional questions for everyone. Okay. So the guidelines are split into several different sections, people, places, processes. There is quite a bit expansion on communications, and then the safety plan. What I just referenced with the signing on to the attestation of the guidelines, another piece of that is that you must have created and downloaded the safety plan or created your own safety plan, and you must have a copy of that at your business at all times. So that's something we'll get into a little bit deeper. So the people concepts are split into a couple of different categories. The first one and main one, again, no surprises here. We've all been hearing about this, the physical distancing and the mask wearing. The first set of notes pertains to your workforce. There are recommendations in there that even though people are allowed to open now, you should continue to limit your workforce on site to only what is required in order to actually do the business that you're going to conduct. Doesn't mean everyone should come right back to work automatically. Another piece that was in there pretty clearly in the very beginning of the guidelines was maintaining your occupancy total for both your employees and your customers, and obviously no one's letting a lot of customers in the door right away, assume that this might be a recommendation in the next phase of retail operations as well, that you maintain no more than a 50% of your normal occupancy in your spaces. So that again might influence what your operations can be and how quickly you can ramp up what volume of business. Signage is a theme throughout these guidelines. You must post signs clarifying requirements for your employees. And at all times, social distancing of 6 feet or greater must be adhered to, with exception of when people can also be wearing face coverings. So this might mean that you need to modify workspaces, or if you have seating areas where employees typically would work at a desk and those two desks are too close together, you can't have those employees in those same spaces without also having face coverings, or possibly additional modifications to your space layouts. There's some suggestions around physical barriers being installed if you haven't already done something like that. And the other pieces, and there wasn't a lot of expansion right in the guidelines document, but if this might apply to you for any reason, you would want to do more research on this. For certain applications, the standard cloth face covering or bandana face covering or disposable mask is not going to be adequate protection for your employees. And if there's any reason why you think that might apply to you, you may need to have N95 level protection on hand and available to your staff in order for it to be considered adequate. So that's something to think through as you work on your own plan. Your plan as it pertains to your customers should first and foremost follow OSHA guidance for takeout and curbside. There are links within the guidelines documents to direct you to other resources. Again, displaying signage with what services you have available, what instructions you have for your customers, and what your hours will be is important. Reserving parking spaces nearby and clearly marking them that they are for curbside pickup if that's something that you can do. The city and DIA have collaborated to make additional parking spaces available downtown, and I know Allison and Gary can share more on that later, and Tom, but that's a wonderful thing that they've done to try to help facilitate this. Staggering your customer arrivals and pickups. So this is a logistics challenge. Many people might not be used to having to deal with this, but if you're communicating with a customer, they've placed an order with you, you know they're coming to get some of your inventory and you're planning on making that delivery to their vehicle. Obviously, you might need to stagger pickup times and schedule those with them. You don't want them all showing up at once, and you don't want them showing up when there might not be a parking space available for them. Reminding them about face covering and social distance expectations and requirements that you have in advance of them coming. So making sure you're communicating that in advance, using all your regular communications mechanisms, using touchless payment or pay ahead options instead of exchanging cash or exchanging money using hands at the time of transaction is recommended. I think this is logical, but any typically tightly confined spaces that you'd have more than one person in at a time, you want to be avoiding that. And this, again, I feel is maybe a down the road thing, unless you have multiple employees on site and very congested spaces that you'd need to worry about. You may need to be looking at how would you modify the layouts of your space and your store to ensure that social distancing can be adhered to. You may need to look at changing directional patterns in your store. You may need one direction rather than people crossing ways in an aisle or near in between racks, let's say. So that's something to think about now, even if you don't absolutely need it right out the gate with your curbside. This is probably obvious as well, but you know, depending on how many employees someone has, if they're bringing people back to work, they may have cause to have meetings with those folks. They may tend to gather in spaces, and at this stage, the recommendation is still limiting in-person gatherings, still using video and teleconferencing meeting methods whenever possible. This isn't just flip the switch and return to normal. If you can have some people remote, if you can use teleconferencing, you should continue doing that. Any meetings that are had must be done in open, well-ventilated spaces and ensure social distance can be maintained. And another couple of areas that they specifically mentioned that employers should be aware of are restrooms. So both for your workforce and for, you're probably not letting any customers in your restrooms at this stage, but maybe you will in the next stage. How are you going to manage the actual total occupancy of your restrooms? Are you going to limit it to one person at a time, even though you normally would allow 3 in? Those are things to start thinking about. Break rooms, same thing. And then finally, there's a recommendation that if you need to stagger your scheduling or trickle your workforce in, those are things that you would want to think about. Again, not to belabor the point, you obviously want to limit your interpersonal, hang on just a second, congregating in the same spaces. Only the staff that's necessary to do the work at this phase should be on site. You may need to adjust your hours to spread your employees and your customers over longer periods of time. So again, I think this all probably with what I've already said is obvious. One of the other recommendations though is batching activities, particularly where multiple people need to touch the same product. So think about your workflow, think about how products normally move into your business and out of your business. It may be logical to have one person do multiple activities that multiple people used to do if it limits the total number of people that are touching those products or handling those products on any given day. And then, an early reference to the additional enhanced cleaning procedures, you may need to adjust your hours to accommodate what will now be expected of you as far as cleaning your facility and your workspaces. Again, movement and commerce, prohibiting non-essential visitors to your location. So you're only serving those customers that need to be there. You are not having so-and-so's boyfriend or girlfriend stop by to check on them at lunch break. People should not be casually dropping by your business if it's not necessary and they're not either going there to report to work or you aren't filling an order for them. Establishing designated areas for pickups and deliveries. So if you don't have that curbside, but people are doing in-store, if it's not really obvious where they should go, where they should enter and exit, you would want to designate that. If you have the ability to have a separate entrance and a separate exit, that is something worth considering. Some people do have that luxury. And then you can manage the flow of your people more clearly. Obviously, you'd need signage to do that, but that's something to think about. Customer waiting areas. Again, I'm sure you all are probably experiencing what I am outside right now. If it's torrential downpouring out and you have 3 different people coming in a 20-minute period of time to pick up their stuff and so shows up early, you aren't trying to right now invite all those people into your store at the same time. Or if you do, you need to figure out how to manage them and keep them distant from one another. Again, the touchless payment theme, touchless delivery is encouraged. If anyone's done curbside pickup at someplace like Target or any of the other stores recently, you've probably seen them implementing some of these procedures already. You keep the drivers in their vehicles, they drive up, you have a way to identify them and know who they are. You certainly hopefully have already asked them to have their mask or their PPE. Some of them don't even hand the product directly to the customer. They open the back door and put it directly in the back seat, or they ask the customer which one they would prefer. Another important key was sanitizing the hands of the person making the delivery to the vehicle before they go out to do the delivery and after they return. So these folks are touching the customer's product. They're also going out and potentially having an exchange with the customer. They need to sanitize or wash their hands before they go and after they return. A little bit more about masks and gloves here. Again, this is all following with what the county and other health officials have already been saying. So I'm sure there's not a lot of surprises here for anyone, except that now we're going to have to all be in the same spaces exercising these habits. If 6 feet of social distance cannot be kept, Anyone, whether it's an employee or the business owner or the customer, should be wearing a face covering. As an employer, you are required to provide face coverings to your employees at no cost to them. You also are required to allow them to wear their own if it's adequate based on, being protective enough for your work circumstances. If they have a fabric mask that they made or they purchased and they would choose to wear that one instead, you have to allow them to wear theirs. I think that's an important clarification, because we've heard stories of some people not being allowed to wear, whatever kind of masks in their workplace. You must also have adequate PPE supply on hand should they need a replacement at any time. Let's say their straps broke on their mask and they can't use it anymore. You've got to have a replacement for them on hand. Or if you have a customer show up who does not have PPE and you can't maintain social distance from them, you need to have a mask to give them. Any fabric face coverings, and you should definitely, from a best practice perspective, make sure your employees know that this is your expectation of them. They have to wash their face coverings that they wear that are fabric or not disposable after every shift that they work. They shouldn't be reusing it. No one should be sharing it. I'm sure that's incredibly obvious to everyone. There may be some cases where you want to require gloves, and some particular tasks may require gloves for safety for all involved. They're absolutely required now for touching any food products. So that's important because, that may not have been clear to people in the past. You also must provide training or verify that they know how to properly put their mask or their PPE on, take it off, and dispose of it.
So, Jennifer, just a question came in relating to N95 masks. I think it's probably the likely thing to say here is that most everyone on this call probably won't need to worry about N95 masks. But having said that, in the state guidance that has been sent out, you need to read it, because they describe occasions where perhaps these N95 masks would be required. And that might be cases where there's a workshop, where there's something going on, where there's more likelihood that some spewing or something would be going on that'd be very different from what the normal case is, in which case then they're looking for a higher level of protection. But that N95 masks require slightly different protocol than regular cloth masks.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I think that some of these regulations and guidelines, they just issued regulations for other industry sectors as well. My guess is that some of these are shared guidelines. Like for instance, if you're manufacturing a beauty care product that you're then going to sell retail, that may be a case where you might need a higher level of protection. I don't know. You would definitely want to do the research on that to be sure whether the people working to create that product should be wearing a higher level of mask protection. I want to make sure we keep moving. Great question, absolutely. I'm going to try to go through some of these slides a little bit quicker. Hygiene and cleaning, there's guidance from the CDC and the New York State Department of Health. You're expected to comply with all of that guidance. You need to keep a cleaning log, including the date, time, and scope of the cleaning performed. You have to have hand hygiene stations. So that's either a hand washing station with soap, running warm water, and disposable paper towels, or hand sanitizer with at least 60% alcohol. You must provide appropriate cleaning supplies for shared surfaces, such as the staff kitchen or the customer counter, where people are each working at the same cash register on their shift. They must be cleaned, and you must provide the cleaning supplies so that they can be cleaned in between every customer and between different employees touching them. And then everyone has to wash their hands. You have to conduct regular cleaning and disinfection of your retail location, and frequent for high-risk areas, more frequent. Cleaning must be rigorous and ongoing and should occur for every shift, every day, or more often if you think it's needed. Restrooms need particular attention. Reducing the capacity is again mentioned here. Regularly disinfecting any equipment or shared workstations. So again, if someone has their own workspace and they clean that once a day, that's fine. If they have to share workspaces with other employees like cash registers or shared computers, you need to be sure that those places are being cleaned more often. You also have to, of course, take extra precautions and do extra cleaning if you discover there's a positive COVID-19 case. This would be all heavily transited and high touch areas. There's CDC guidelines for cleaning and disinfecting after a confirmed infection. I'm not going to get into any more of that. You need to, this is an area we did get a question in about. How do you deal with returned merchandise? There's not a lot of clarity yet as far as how anyone would expect you to handle that, but we would certainly suggest that you start thinking about how you would handle that. Do you want to have a period of time where you're, adjust the time during which you accept returns? Do you accept returns and then you place them aside and let them sit for a few days before anyone processes them? How do you clean? Certain things can be cleaned, certain things are going to be much harder to clean. How are you in your particular place of business going to manage receiving returns and reselling any returns that you might receive? As soon as we see any more guidance on that, hopefully something more will come with the next level of retail guidance. We will absolutely be sure to share that with you. All retail areas with handling of shared objects must be cleaned daily at minimum. Again, lots of questions of what does that mean? What do you have to clean? Is it more than just the floor and the shelving and the high touch fixtures? Obviously, you're in this stage, you are not allowing customers to come in and browse and touch everything in your store. So for right now, that doesn't mean a whole lot. But in a few weeks or next month, if you're open and allowing more people to wander through, it's going to mean something different. You must prohibit any shared food and beverages. So let's say usually the staff would like to order lunch together and you'd leave all the food together on a staff table and people would come in and buffet style serve themselves lunch from that. Not right now. You don't want to be doing that right now. You must provide a socially distant space for people to eat lunch and have breaks, or you need to stagger them. Again, there's definitely some things in here are more, you must do this, and some things are more recommendations. I've already referenced these things. Phasing in activities to allow for operational issues to be resolved. As well as you might plan, you might not think of everything as you're going through this planning phase and as you're doing your safety plan. You are all going to realize, and your employees will realize, things that could be done differently and more safely moving forward. And customers will probably do things you might not have predicted. So making sure you allow yourself time to phase things in and adjust your plans. Again, considering limiting the number of employees, your hours of operation, the number of customers you're going to serve. Starting up slowly. As much as I know you all want to get going and you all want to bring as many customers back as quickly as you can, you want to be sure that you're doing it as safely as possible for everyone involved. Again, the communications plan, there's a few things here for you to consider. You have to affirm that you reviewed and understand all of these guidelines and everything in the 15-page document. And that means that you're not just gonna, I read this thing, I'm gonna actually do what they say and I'm gonna implement these procedures. You need to communicate all of the procedures that your employees should know, that your visitors and your customers should know. You need to encourage your customers to adhere to the guidelines. We've all heard stories now of different things happening in different places, and I know those may be difficult interactions for some folks. You may have customers that don't want to comply. It's a good time to think about how are you going to handle those situations if you have customers who say, no, I'm not wearing the mask, or no, I'm not going to do what that guideline says. You have to decide if you want to serve that customer. And I would also recommend arming your employees with what are they going to do if you have a bad actor, if you have a customer that becomes angry or difficult to manage. You should post signage inside and outside to remind everyone involved of what your protocols are. And now we get a little bit more into the public health side of things. What are you required to do as an employer related to screening and testing your employees, and reporting if anything comes up, and what are your employees required to report? You must implement mandatory daily health screening practices for your employees, and I included volunteers here because we definitely will have organizations in the next phase that have volunteers that act like employees in places like Green Star do right now. Screening needs to be done either remotely by phone or electronic survey before they report to work, or at the very beginning of their shift, or just before their shift. It can be done on site in person. You need to coordinate preventing the employees from intermingling or being in the same space with each other prior to the daily screening. You have to require this of all workers and essential visitors, but you do not need to screen your customers. You need to know the symptoms and screen for them. There's plenty more information in the guidelines about this. You need to require your employees to immediately disclose to you if their circumstances around symptoms change. So there's a requirement to report, a duty to report here that you will now need to require from your employees. You can, but do not have to, conduct daily temperature checks. That's up to you. You do need to find ways to protect anyone involved with daily screening procedures. So if you have someone on your team that you've designated to act in this role and they have to screen people in person, you must provide them with PPE to protect them, including a mask, gloves, a gown, and a face shield. If an employee screens as positive or symptomatic, you will not allow them to enter work. You will immediately send them home. You will give them instructions and resources for how to contact their healthcare provider and get testing. You will also notify the county health department and the state department of health. I want to check on this because I'm not sure that the health department isn't going to do that second level notification for you. The guidelines say you need to notify both, but it's my assumption that you're not going to have to tell the state, that the county's going to do that reporting. If close contact with someone who's been tested positive is reported, you also should not allow your employee to come to work that day. You need to review all employee and visitor responses on a daily basis and maintain a record of that review. All of this information is being collected in a log. You need to designate a safety monitor. It could be yourself if that's what you need to do, who will ensure continuous compliance with your safety plan. Again, mention the maintain a log of every person who has close contact with other individuals. You cannot mandate your customers to complete health screens, but if you, for some reason, need to have a lot of high contact with your customers, other than just a quick pickup, you may wish to encourage them to do so. A little more on screening and testing and what do you do? If someone says they're tested positive or they have symptoms but no test, you can't have them come back to work for 2 weeks in person. If they have no symptoms but they tested positive, same thing, 14 days. If anyone close to them living in their household or that they had close contact with has tested positive, they should notify you and they should also be quarantining for 14 days. Anyone with close contact but no symptoms should be notifying you and being regularly monitored. They should be required to wear the mask, follow social distancing guidelines, and do extra cleaning to disinfect the workspaces. And I think this is already obvious, but and I know that it's really difficult, it's gonna be allergy season. You aren't gonna know for sure that someone's symptoms have anything to do with COVID. But anyone who has any symptoms related or that could be interpreted as COVID symptoms should not be working and should be sent home. Again, that duty to notify the health department if this has happened. This is where the contact tracing piece comes into play. As you know, the health department is working on contact tracing. Our entire region is only being allowed to open because we have adequate contact tracing set up, and we're prepared to do this work. If you have a positive test by anyone in your workplace, you need to notify immediately. They need to be able to trace and contact other people within your workforce. And this is where maintaining good customer records could be very useful to you. Especially for a small enough operation, it's possible that they could trace and contact everyone who has interacted with that person. So maintaining good records is important. You will need to provide them with all employees who have worked in the last 48 hours. If you have visitor and customer information, you should be prepared to provide that. You can maintain, or they will try to maintain, confidentiality as required by law. And again, duty to report by your employees. If they've been notified by the health department that they've come in contact with someone, they are required to tell you, so that you can require them to follow the protocols and send them home. So this is the section about the safety plan. We've provided links to it. It's pretty easy to find on the state website. You can have a different plan if you want, but I think for most people, the safest thing is to be sure that you at least have everything that's in the state's template addressed in your plan. And since they've provided a template and it may be easier for you to use theirs, go ahead and do that. You have to have this plan. You have to keep copies of this plan on your premises at all times. And frankly, I would probably keep a copy on your person. I would keep a copy at home. You never know when someone's gonna stop you and ask for it. If you're out making deliveries to some customers, I see you shaking your head, Larry, you might as well have 3 copies, right? You never know if you're not there that day and your worker can't find your copy of the plan, if you might need to produce it. But anyway, if you're inspected, or if the county health department comes to see you, or if someone wants to file a complaint against you, you are going to be asked to produce this plan. Someone else might walk in and ask to see your plan. Just have it ready to go, and be ready to produce it. Definitely recommend providing it to all of your employees so they see it. They need to see a copy of it. They need to know what's in it. If you have essential volunteers, they should also see it and know what's in it. And I know most of you aren't nonprofit organizations, but we do have at least one retailer that's a nonprofit organization. I think it's a good idea to be sure that you share your plan with your board of directors and that they see a copy of it as well. The attestation that you are going to sign, if you go in, I'm sure most of you have seen these documents already. We sent it out in a link in this email and a few others. You are responsible for signing this and making sure that you can keep and follow your safety plan. I would recommend, if you can grab a copy of your attestation, keep that as well. Someone asked about who's going to be monitoring this, who's keeping charge of this. The quick answer is nobody. Nobody's going to come around and be policing every single business in town. There's no one local organization or local government that has the time or the capacity for everyone to submit their plans to and have them approved. There's an honor system element to this, but this is the reason why we're stressing so heavily. Don't just read the stuff and then click OK and submit that you are going to do it without really being sure you're going to do it. You know, take it seriously. There are solid public health reasons why you should do that. You don't want to be the business that has someone complain and say that you're not compliant with what's in these guidelines and say that you don't have a plan and then have the county health department have to come and check on you, because that is when there will be an enforcement mechanism. The process is there's a place on the state's website to submit a complaint. I think we've all seen plenty of evidence of people that are ready to complain and ready to tattle on people if they aren't doing what they think they should be doing. Seen lots of it already online. So the county health department's only going to have so much capacity for enforcement. I know they don't want to be in this position. But just be prepared, make sure you have your plan, make sure you're complying with things so that if a complaint comes through, you are able to defend your business and your actions. And just sort of a quick summary here. Again, the key points of, this is really boiling it down, key points of what you need to do for curbside pickup. Employee and purchaser in the vehicle should wear masks and gloves are preferred if possible. Hand sanitizer must be available and used before and after the curbside pickup. For in-store pickup, it's definitely a little bit more complicated. You're also now potentially allowing people into your space. Requires ordering ahead and pre-arranging the orders, social distancing required in the store, no more than 50% maximum capacity, wear your masks, everyone involved wear your masks, and still use the hand sanitizer and hand hygiene. So really briefly, these are the questions we got in advance. Let's check and see how many of them we answered already, and then we can address the rest of the questions. Who will be auditing the businesses against their plan? Just talked about that one. What happens if your plan is insufficient despite certifying that you're compliant? Again, that's only going to become an issue if a customer or someone else reports that business, files that through New York State's reporting system, and New York sends that back to the county so that the county can come and visit that business and find out whether they're compliant or not.
I would just add that for continued or egregious non-compliance, local law enforcement would be empowered to enforce
Sure.
the guidelines. And we've also heard that compliance with the reopening guidelines will be monitored by an oversight institution to be appointed within each region. So just
isn't that gonna be the control board as well, or no, separate?
I don't know, Jennifer.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Someone asked about community leaders and mask wearing and how this will all be communicated in public. Gary, did you want to reference this? We've been talking about this a bit.
Community on mask wearing. Yeah, well, I mean, there's very clear language in here about whenever you're within 6 feet of someone, you need to be wearing a mask. That is the ruling of the state as of today. And so, but beyond that, you know, I think one of the things businesses have to think about is, I mean, you're wearing masks for safety reasons for yourself and for others. And so obviously, you know, that's something you just need to keep in mind throughout this whole thing. But there's a third item that I think hasn't been talked about yet, and I've come across this now on probably 3 or 4 occasions so far, where I've heard comments from people commenting about businesses, you know, where they've looked inside or they've looked and they've seen employees, you know, then there might be the owner in the store not wearing a mask, or somebody, or even essential businesses for a while where there weren't people wearing masks, and the blowback and the public feedback was extremely negative. In some cases, wearing a mask, even when you don't want to, even when you're maybe, you know, you might be the only person in the store and people are looking at you through the window. They may or may not choose to come in based on whether or not you know, it feels like you are wearing a mask and you are complying. So, I mean, you don't have to wear a mask if people are not within 6 feet of you. However, you know, the impression that you leave may be as important as, you know, the legality of what you're doing.
Can I clarify the question, please? Because that's my question, but it was my question. So
Go ahead.
what I was trying to understand is, what is the outward public position that leadership is going to take? Is there going to be a message that says to our customers, is the position that we're going to expect or hope or require that customers on the commons are going to be wearing masks?
Well, that will vary by place. In downtown, we are working on something like that, and actually, we're not ready to put that out yet, but we will be working on something like that. We think will be sort of a business customer agreement, if you will, where, yeah, I mean, so, but that, remember, in the notes that Jennifer gave us, you know, there's a different, customers are I mean, you will, you know, be able to say what customers can and can't do coming into your store, and there's an expectation for the most part that customers will be wearing masks.
So I did just want to clarify one more thing about that, Gary. So I think the county's guidance has been very clear about mask wearing. I also think that the mayor has publicly endorsed mask wearing and has donned his mask and shown videos. I will say that our organizations have been talking about some additional video. I think you're asking marketing questions. You want to know if someone else is going to support you in making this, the community expectation. And the answer to that, in my opinion, is yes. We have community leaders and our organizations all intend to try to support our businesses with messaging about this being our shared expectation. And, we don't have it yet, but I think we'll be working on something very soon. So, but I also think that community leaders have been really clear, and there's a lot of examples of folks putting their masks on, showing that you should be wearing your mask, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that's coming, Deirdre. There were a few questions asking about signage or help with signage. I think, Gary and Allison, you can answer this differently as you want. By and large, signage is the responsibility of the business. There are some examples. I will say the county has a nice example of what is expected of visitors that you could just print out and post on your doors if you wanted to. There are also local businesses that can help you with signage. I'm assuming like Noman Copy, for example, if they're not already open or still open because they were essential in some way. I would expect Noman Copy and Uncle Marty in College Town, et cetera, to be able to help with signage very soon. Obviously, we all want to help facilitate supporting our local businesses that can help you get the signage that you need. We may at some point pull some signage together that's more cohesive and branded for, from our organizations or some subset thereof. We've talked about it. We're not quite there yet. So I would say in the interim, if you're trying to operate in the next couple of weeks, make sure you have the signage you need so that your customers and your workers know what you expect of them. We may have something more for you in the next several business days. Does anyone want to add anything to that?
Yeah, in the downtown area, we've already made a commitment to print out copies of the state of the. Allison, is it the state or the county poster?
Tompkins County Health Department has some very nice posters available, especially the attention visitors, and it does make it very clear you need to have a mask on. We have printed a bunch of those today, and they're outside of our office. So if you want to stop by the outside of our office and pick up a poster, we know it is an 11 by 17 poster, and that is a limiting factor for businesses who don't have 11 by 17 posters. So we do have them available as of today outside of our office. But we will work to expand that and work with the chamber and the city to make it more widely available beyond downtown as well. But the chamber, or excuse me, the health department has started and made some signage available, and we'll continue to work on maybe additional signage as well. But,
thanks, Allison. So the last question here that was submitted, which is sort of the most complicated one, I think, well, our team all discussed this and we have some thoughts, and who's going to take this one?
Let me start. The simple answer is this is going to be a bigger problem for phase 2. In practice, remember, we're in phase 1. Phase 1 is curbside pickup or pass off at your at your counter. The state has not given anybody authorization to browse the store. That is not part of the deal. And so the idea of trying on clothes or trying on jewelry or playing around with the product should not be part of this phase. Now, there is the issue if you give it, if you send it to somebody and they don't like it and want to give it back, there is that return question does come into play. But it will be an issue we're going to have to deal with quite seriously in phase 2. We expect to see the state provide some guidance on this, because they provided no guidance on this for phase 1, probably because the expectation was there were not, that people would not be doing such a thing. But it very much will be an issue in phase 2. There are some solutions one can start thinking about, everything from having people clean their hands before they come into the store, to wearing gloves, to you know, in some cases, you take the merchandise that's been used and take it back and store it in your back for a period of time until, you know, the period of the COVID life disappears. I mean, this is a challenging question, and frankly, one that I think even the big box stores, frankly, haven't done a very good job dealing with at this point.
And Gary, for those who may not be monitoring the chat here, Peter Parks posted if you are a clothing type business, he has a nice template that may work for you, and you can email him, and his email address is in the chat there.
So we have another question. There's a couple other questions in the chat. One thing, someone's looking for large quantities of hand sanitizer, antiseptic cleaning supplies, masks, etc. We have identified and have been sharing several different PPE suppliers over the last several weeks. There are several local companies that are PPE suppliers of both non-branded and also, if you want custom branded any of these things, they can probably do that for you. The other thing is that I believe the county is still taking requests for the cotton masks and the bulk hand sanitizer. I will see if I can get you the link to that form quickly and paste it in the chat box for anyone who might need to put in one of those requests.
But check the websites of either the chamber or the DIA, because I think we've had information about how one can access those.
Yeah.
That's going to be an ongoing question. I mean, as all these, you know, there are 3,000 small businesses, you know, in our community, right? Jennifer, at least 3,000. And it's you know, when they all reopen, everybody has to follow all these rules, and there's going to be a big run on this stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how we keep up. That's going to be one of our challenges.
Absolutely.
Any other questions before we wrap up? We do want to make sure we end this around 5 minutes to 5, because many of us will be going on to at 5 o'clock. The county is sponsoring its own briefing on the state of things and its take on reopening. And Jason Molino and Frank Krupa will be presiding over that, and that is, I'll be finding that very informative and very helpful. I guess the other thing, I mean, one of the things, there was a question about HIPAA, about dealing with the questions about, well, when I do all this, how do I navigate HIPAA questions? It's a really good question, because we're getting, you know, you're starting to get really close to these issues of personnel. As you heard, when one has to disclose it, you know, you're asking people to disclose how they're feeling every day. And you know, that's going to be a prerequisite for working. And self-reporting is important. And if people don't want to honor that or can't honor it, then one would have to have some sort of discussion about that, because the state is requiring it, and it's a pretty important condition for us keeping this thing in check. So it's going to be one of the major things we have to deal with. But yes, I mean, one has to be as careful as we possibly can. And I think the county has been very diligent about being careful about how they disclose information about people. You will get information, for example, you know, when there was a occurrence at Green Star over the weekend, you know, it was identified it was Green Star, but we don't know who the person was. We don't know, you know, details about that, and that's the idea. I mean, they will do what they need to do to protect people, but also do what they need to do to protect individual rights too. So I don't know if Jennifer, anything else on that?
No, and I had a chance to ask some additional questions on the response to that particular instance. And I think, you know, one of the things that's difficult for people in so many ways with this whole situation is that sometimes we need to trust authority, and we need to trust our government officials, and we need to trust our public health officials. And so, you know, in that case, as just an example, there's a certain amount of contact tracing that the county is able to do. And then there was a limit to how much they could directly contact trace. And that's why the more general guidance for testing and isolation is what they had to recommend to what's probably thousands of people who walk through the doors at Green Star during their first big opening weekend. So, you know, it's a really good illustration of this is a new world that we're living in. This is certainly already impacted all of us and will continue to. It's a good illustration of helping you probably all think through how would that work if that was my workplace? How would that impact me if that was my business? And how do I do everything within my power to prevent you know, these things from happening, to protect, you know, yourselves and your workforce and your customers, obviously. There's going to be more cases. People are going to move around. We all want the economic benefits of increased activity, right? So, you know, continuing to do so as carefully as possible and under the best guidance that our officials have been able to give us with the information they have available to them is just the best way that we can all be moving forward together. So.
Okay. The other thing I would tell you is that we put this together quickly because we know that many of you are interested in trying to do this curbside or this, you know, store pickup. And we didn't want you to run out and do this without having all the information about what you needed to do to make that happen properly. We don't want anybody to get into trouble. Frankly, we don't want to see we don't want to see our community get into trouble. We want to proceed. We want things to proceed. So, the other thing I would say, next week, next Friday, the DIA and the Chamber and the city are going to be actually co-hosting another retail workshop. We anticipate by that time that that we probably will see some additional guidelines for phase 2. And so we would like to help you all get ready for that. And so we will have a much more in-depth discussion about that at that time. But today we wanted to focus on curbside and making sure that, again, I mean, do curbside if you're ready for it. Don't do curbside if you are not. The last thing you want to do is get into trouble and you know, set yourself back, set your employees back, set the community back. So, I mean, these plans take a little effort, a little work. They're really important. I mean, you know, they're really designed to help prevent the spread of the disease and to help us be safe and to save lives. So we want you all to do that. So thanks very much. And we'll hopefully see you again. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Nice job, you guys.
Have a good evening. Bye, everyone.
Bye.